So I've just been told it's time to introduce the rest of the panel. So I'd like to step up to the podium and welcome first James Hygate. James,
great.
welcome, James.
Just grab any old seats.
James Quinn. And most importantly, Gabriela Herculano. Thank you for waiting, everyone. Sorry we got swapped around, but it was very nice to see Sadhguru's conversation as well. I'd like to start by requesting James to just quickly give a 1-minute introduction, all of you, about your businesses, what you do, and then we'll jump into questions. Right
Sure.
on. So James, why don't you go first?
Thank you for the kind introduction, and what an honour to be here today. So my company's called Green Fuels, and we've spent the last 20 years supplying and developing decentralised equipment to produce biofuels from waste. And we're on the process of actually establishing a number of facilities across India at the moment. And we focus on waste such as used cooking oil, animal fats, etc., converted into fuel. But more recently, we've been developing processes to convert other biological waste, such as sewage sludge, into fuels, such as aviation fuels.
Amazing. Thank you. James, is it true that you're powering the Aston Martin of a royal family member with cheese and wine waste? Is that true?
Yes, that's been some time. So that was 14 years ago. We were contacted by the Prince of Wales, who's obviously a huge environmentalist and very keen to decarbonise all of his systems and all his transport. So we were always looking for waste products that we can turn into something useful. And yeah, we found some waste wine and waste cheese to produce bioethanol to run the Aston Martin.
That is incredible. So nice to have you here.
Thank you so much.
The next person I'd like to introduce is James Quinn, please.
Hi, James Quinn, CEO of Faradion, and Faradion has developed the next generation battery technology, sodium ion technology, so this goes beyond lithium. There's no lithium, there's no cobalt, there's no copper, there's no graphite, so not only is it lower cost because we don't use those expensive raw materials or conflict materials coming from Congo or so forth, it's a safer technology and it's a more sustainable technology as well.
Wow, and you recently did a transaction with an Indian entrepreneur?
Yeah, Mr. Mukesh Ambani. So we were acquired by Reliance actually on New Year's Eve. So it's a busy holiday for us time, but a nice way to celebrate the
Fantastic. It's nice to see Indian companies, acquiring technologies to help India as well. So I'm sure you're going to be spending a lot of time building this business back in India.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Gabriela, would you like to tell a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I presume that I was invited to speak today because I run the one and only fund, exchange-traded fund, that represents the theme of distributed renewable energy. We had conviction. The fund is not quite 1 year old. By the way, I'm CEO and co-founder of a London-based green fintech called iClima Earth. So this fund is not quite 1 year old, and we had conviction that the energy transition is absolutely inevitable, never going to be orderly. Then therefore, consumers of electricity, which means pretty much all of us other than the 700 million that have no access to electricity at the bottom of the pyramid, we all would struggle with security of supply and predictability of prices. So we do not see the invasion coming, but that just exacerbates the energy crisis and bring the importance of the solutions that are, technical term is behind the meter, everything that happens at the point of consumption. We're all going to become prosumers. We're all going to be able to produce electricity at the point of consumption, and that goes way beyond because we're going to be able to store that electricity, whether that's stationary or using the powerful batteries inside the electric vehicles, which is called vehicles to grid, and then aggregate all of these exciting assets using a lot of technology, 5G, Internet of Things, is all here. We are already doing that. Those things are not concepts, so that's called virtual power plants. And we're the only fund that represents these incredibly exciting stories, which I think can play a gigantic role as India decarbonizes and brings electricity to more and more parts of the population.
So you only invest in public companies?
We only invest in public companies.
But the money is more needed in the private companies, right?
Absolutely. It's a pipeline. That's capitalism at its best, right? That's the flow that you invest in the companies that are private, then they go public, SPAC. We have a lot of companies in our universe that were listed through SPAC structures. And that's capitalism at its best. That's innovation. That's the acceleration that we must see in the space.
So how do we create incentives for companies to come in and invest? Because the climate journey is hard and long, right, for all the startups. And these guys have been around, and I mean, he's built a brilliant business and sold, but I'm sure you worked for many, many years to reach the point for Reliance to acquire you, and for, he said 14 years ago he built the
Yeah,
chief.
20 years since I
Good
built
God.
the first
And
refinery.
a lot of the entrepreneurs are used to the digital age of getting funded. And how will they build this pipeline of what are the incentives that are needed in the industry from government and from public companies to build, for entrepreneurs to build out their businesses?
Well, we need capital. Capital markets can be a source of good, and we've been very vocal about this. We bring some concepts from finance. Time value of money, $1 in the future is not worth as much as $1 now. Time value of carbon. The carbon that we preclude from emitting, that's much more relevant and impactful now than, for example, direct carbon sequestration, which is a pie in the sky in the future. We need to bring that concept, and we take that forward. Potential avoided emissions, best way to reduce carbon in the atmosphere, we're all going to agree on that, is not emitting in the first place. So that can be estimated. That's called potential avoided emissions. Then we bring another concept, which is return on invested capital, carbon returns. How much does it cost for us to not emit in the first place 1 gigaton of CO2 equivalent? So let's use this to underwrite investments, and let's make sure that the capital flows faster towards what really moves the needle. Telepresence moves the needles. Distributed generation moves the needle. So if we're all starting to speak that same language and quantify things, we make invisible hand work much faster.
Why do you think it's not happened till now? Like we keep talking about, this is COP26. That means there have been 26 before this. And now it's 27. Why do you think these guys have not figured out the basics of like making carbon an attractive sort of measurable metric and value, and put a value to it till now?
Well, I think that most of the GDP is very much attached to the let's do less harm. If you look at ESG, that's what ESG represents, is scorecards. Beautiful concept, extremely relevant, but it became associated with these black box scorecards. My scorecard is better than yours, and then a lot of capital flows towards the less harm. Is Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, some software companies, they just have a lower carbon footprint, and we're telling too much of that story. Paris, that was the low-hanging fruit. That was the way to start. Let's do less harm. But now we need to shift the narrative. We need to focus on the solutions, the batteries, the biofuels. Let's quantify the relevant solutions. The existing technologies, they're all here. We need to scale up. So if we start talking more about not the users of the solutions, but the producers of the solutions, the Teslas of the world, right? It's just obvious for me, in my mind, that the most valuable company on the planet should be the company that is really accelerating problem solving, therefore Tesla. But Amcor has a market cap that is now 3 times that of Tesla. So we're not there. This is a transition, and we need to, all of us that are on this side, I think, be a little bit louder and be a little bit smarter as we bring the tools, time value of carbon, carbon returns, potential avoided emissions, and all the technologies that move the needle, and talk more about that.
Fantastic.
I think it's also taken some time, right? To your question of why it's taken 26 COPs. It's taken some time for these technologies to gather critical mass and to become viable. And I think we've, if you look at, wind energy or solar, right? I mean, the viability cycles over the past decade, it's just remarkable, right? How significant the economic change has been.
Yeah, the cost of production of solar has gone down dramatically, and I'm sure it'll happen in other. Speaking of standardization, I'd love to hear more about James's view on standardization of battery technology, because you're doing something so different. How does this work, and how do you see this evolving as we move away from the sort of the supply chain challenges around China, Ukraine? How is the world going to sort of deal with this going forward?
That's a really good question. It's an interesting question because the panel's about disruptive technology, and I kind of think disruptive technology is the bane of all manufacturing, right? We want to tweak it and tune it and massage it. We don't want to disrupt it, right? When I look at sodium-ion technology, I say it's a highly differentiated chemistry, but it's not disruptive from a manufacturing standpoint. We use the exact same infrastructure, same equipment to produce lithium ion. It's just different chemistries. Like in a cook in your kitchen, you cook Mexican one night, you cook Indian another night. using all the same infrastructure. And I think that's a real advantage for this technology to be able to deploy. I think that's one aspect of it. In terms of standardization, I think you're seeing different models now, and I think technology enables you to innovate not just in the technology itself, but in the business models and the opportunities to bring that out to the market. And I think you're seeing batteries as a service. I think India is a really excellent market opportunity for batteries as a service. You need standards to be able to do that. You need to be able to swap things out and put it in. But I think what's also interesting about that model is it makes it lower cost and easier for the consumer. And but what it does is whoever owns those assets is more concerned about the cost of ownership of those assets, where I think in India in particular it's a very price-driven market. I need the lowest price, lowest cost. But if I own those assets, I'm worried about cost of ownership of those assets, the environmental aspect of those assets. You see in NEO in Norway is actually swapping out batteries on their car. And so I think this technology enables us to look at different kinds of innovations, but you need standards to be able to do that as well.
Fantastic. And just for the young green entrepreneurs out there, how long did it take you to get to your exit? Or if it's not happened, like to this point, how many years has it taken? Because the world has to start thinking about entrepreneurship differently from the digital age, where you could start a company, get acquired by Amazon, get acquired by Google in 2 or 3 years. Now it's going to take longer. It's physical business. It's not going to be, boom, you're out, Series A, Series B. And so how do you see it? How long was it for you?
Well, I think for all overnight success, it takes at least 10, 12 years, or something, right? Or 20 years. So, I mean, what does President Kennedy said? We do this not because it's easy, but because it's hard, right? And it takes capital, it takes money, it takes patience and persistence. It takes experience, optimism to be able to do that and to keep doing it. And, we struggled. I mean, we went out to raise a round of capital right at the time Corona hit. I think if you look at my career, every time there was a black swan event, whether it was 2001, whether it was 2008 and 9 and banks were collapsed, I was raising money. So,
when are you raising it next?
Yeah. So next time I go to raise
Now,
money,
you just did it. You killed the markets.
So it was hard. And then I got to say, the biggest battery company in the world, CATL, announced last year that they're going to go into sodium ion, and they explained why. And that really was a key turning point, that people said, okay, this is really mainstream, it's ready for prime time. And I think we were very fortunate to have a company like Reliance and the vision of Mukesh Ambani to come up and champion this kind of technology, because you need a champion to really change things. If you look at what they've done with Jio, in particular the telecom industry, I think India would have had an extremely difficult time through COVID if you didn't have that ability to have data and work from home and be able to do that. And I think you'll see these kinds of transitions happening now in energy as well.
Fantastic. Mohit, I had a question, because you see all the industries from your vantage point. What technologies do you see playing the biggest role, going forward in the next 5 years, like for investors, for entrepreneurs? I mean, we keep hearing about battery and these are amazing companies, and I'm sure I'll hear more from them. What do you see? Where do you see the maximum disruption coming in younger companies?
Yeah, I think, look, there are a couple of things, right? One is because financial services is such a large part of the overall industry, and because, scope 3 is such a complex issue, I think there are still definitional issues about scope 3. When people are talking about reducing the carbon intensity of their assets by 25%, by 50%, and when companies are being measured by how they meet their performance, I think data is one huge opportunity, right? So the opportunity around data, creating those data sets, I think, we've seen market data opportunity over the past 20 years. Whoever creates the foundational data set that is used for green is going to make billions, right? So that's one clear opportunity. I think the second piece is, if you look at enterprise technology, you look at companies, right? Because my view is largely enterprise technology linked. It's not so much about, the battery industry. From an enterprise technology perspective, smart spaces, right? How do you get more utilization from buildings? Buildings are a huge source of, of carbon and of emissions, right? That's one huge opportunity the industry has to, again, reduce the carbon intensity of your footprint. So I'd say that's the second thing. And the third thing is resource intensity, right? Because resource intensity also goes to the economics of manufacturing businesses. How do we use automation? How do we use tooling? How do we use, the Internet of Things? How do we use 5G to be able to really reduce resource intensity and drive profitability and drive sort of a leaner footprint?
Fantastic. And last, the most interesting company that I've met today was a guy who converts garbage to power and to money, then obviously. So if you could tell us a little bit about, Firstly, why is this not? Why aren't you the Tesla? Because you're using the thing that's available everywhere to power things. Why aren't you there yet? What's your journey been like, and where are you going?
Yeah, well, it's been very interesting, but it's when you look at things like carbon savings, we're probably not far off. So as a company, we deployed technology into over 80 countries, and I think the capacity at the moment would have saved around 7.5 million tons of carbon. So at that point, we were ahead of most other businesses. But our focus is very much around biogenic waste, and people look at waste, people don't find waste that interesting or sexy, but actually you can achieve huge carbon savings from converting those things, 80-90% over the alternatives. I think what you're starting to see now is an awful lot of discussion around things like sustainable aviation fuels, which I believe is right. That's where you'll see biogenic waste materials getting converted into liquid fuels, because
what's the percentage of blend in aviation fuels that you could
at the moment,
see at maximum?
At the moment, nothing really. It's a fraction of a percentage. But you could get to a point where you've got, there's aims for sort of 10%. There's aims for, by 2050, I think 65% of the UK is now set. Technically possible, but challenging with the available materials. And things like aviation are difficult to decarbonise in any other way. Physics kind of says no to flying a long way with batteries. Physics says no to flying a long way with hydrogen if you want to carry other things in the vehicle. So we're seeing, as a business and as an industry, a transition to those transport modalities that are moving big things a long way. So long-haul aviation and large ships. However, if you look at, India, for example, there's an awful lot of decarbonisation that can be done with the road fleet at the moment. Electrification is fantastic. It's definitely what we should be doing. I've driven electric cars for a long time now. Absolutely brilliant. But if you've got if 70% of your energy supply is from coal, actually, using a waste, a biological or biogenic waste material for producing those roads, you will achieve a larger carbon saving in a shorter period of time. So,
but you said you did this cheese to wine thing 14 years ago. Why is it not mass market yet?
Well, that's it. That was really through the availability of the waste materials. But if you look at, so we were producing bioethanol, and we had a target to produce it from what was a waste, so it was going to be discarded. But if you look in the UK at the moment, 10% of all the fuel is bioethanol, gasoline. 7% of all the diesel you fill up with is biodiesel. So it is there, it is being produced. And you can see this transition happening elsewhere. So in India, there's a 5% blend mandate, works out about 5 billion litres per year requirement. But it's probably not as sexy as some of the other subjects for people to be talking about. So it is happening, it is there. It is already a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I think you'll see that continue. But long-term, liquid biofuels will move into those areas that are going to be difficult to decarbonise in any other way.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I've been told, we're running out of time, but thank you guys for listening. I think the most important aspect of disruptive technologies is the evolution of the new venture capital ecosystem, the way timing of rounds will happen, the way financing is going to come in, the reduction in cost of capital, what most people call blended finance, and that has to come from institutions that are more public, and even the private companies and philanthropists who will have to contribute to this. But it's been a very, very interesting panel. Amazing companies. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for listening, guys.
Thank you.